Hello, Carter. Hope you're feeling better. Um, Here's class. Catherine's here. We're going to just go for it. Like I said last week, I will now ignore you. But if you have a question or a comment when your throat gets to feeling better, call me and tell me how you feel about it because I hate that we're wrapping up our Frankenstein without you. Anyway, Merry Christmas. Um, Send me your paper. Also, Catherine gave me her paper. It is the best of essays. It is the worst of essays. Okay, so this past week I had you read Elizabeth Barrett Browning. What did you think of Elizabeth Barrett Browning?
I actually really liked her stuff.
She's very lovely, isn't it? So I asked you on that second one, what is she giving back to him?
I think that she was saying that she would give back to him like her thoughts.
Her thoughts. But it's like they're flowers coming from her heart. And can I borrow yours? So I love this part. She says, okay, take back these thoughts, which here unfolded too, and which on warm and cold days I withdrew from my heart's ground. Indeed, those beds and bowers be overgrown with bitter weeds and rue, and wait thy weeding. My heart's overgrown. When you're not here to weed my heart, like it's overgrown. Yet, here's eglantine, here's ivy. Take them, as I used to do thy flowers, and keep them where they shall not pine. Instruct thine eyes to keep their colors true, and tell thy soul their roots are left in mine. You know, I get to like thinking about that when you cut flowers. You know, the roots are still in the ground, and so the roots of her thoughts are still in her heart. Yes, it's quite lovely. I can't completely remember every poet that I picked for us to do this year, but I think her husband, Robert Browning, who's different, who's got a different bent, but now you've read, if you hadn't already read the famous How Do I Love Thee? Let Me Count the Ways. Now you have. This week, which is not this week, it's this 3 weeks, so I won't see you for 3 weeks. You are reading Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. You know a Longfellow poem, don't you? What is it? I bet when I say it, you'll know it.
Probably the same.
Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere.
Oh,
yes?
Paul Revere, yeah.
On the 18th of April in 75. Yes, that's Longfellow. And he did one called Hiawatha.
I think we read Paul Revere, the poem about Paul Revere, when we did Cruce a few years back.
Oh, yes, I did. I have a picture book, a kid's picture book. Evangeline, he did some longer poems, but I'm just giving you guys 2 short poems because I'm so nice.
Once again, interesting name.
What, Longfellow?
Yeah.
Yes. So we'll talk about this later when we get to Poe, but Poe hated Longfellow. I don't know why. He just thought he was kind of low class. Like he was popular. Yeah, he was like a poet pop star. And Poe thought he wasn't serious enough in taking his art, his deep art seriously. But so we have 2 poems. One is called Snowflakes, which I thought was appropriate. And then the other one's called The Tide Rises, The Tide Falls. And I just want to read the first stanza and notice something. The tide rises, the tide falls. The twilight darkens, the curlew calls. Along the sea sands damp and brown, the traveler hastens towards the town, and the tide rises, the tide falls. The tide rises, the tide falls. It's really hard not to say that without rising and falling. I mean, you have to work at it to keep them on. The tide rises, the tide falls. Just rises has kind of going up and falls has it going down. I think it's amazing, this little tiny detail, but he didn't. It didn't happen by accident, So please read The Tide Rises, The Tide Falls. And Carter, I will send all of these to you as soon as I get internet, which might be Monday. So I would like you guys to read that over break out loud. if possible, and live with Longfellow for a while. And, I mean, you could easily, like, look up some of his longer poems online. I really like Longfellow. I don't care what Poe thinks. I don't care if he was popular. The Village Blacksmith is another famous that's popular for memorizing. Do you have the book of the Harp and the Laurel Wreath? Are you familiar with that book? It's just a book of poems.
I've heard the title. I'm not sure that we have it.
It's a book of poems divided from really easy ones to harder ones, just for memorizing. And I know the Village Blacksmith is in there.
We probably had it at least at one point for school, because we used to memorize poetry. Mostly ooey gooey. It's a classic.
Yes. Well, you know, just because you've already recited your poem for the year doesn't mean you couldn't memorize another one. You could. Okay, one last thing before we launch into Frankenstein here is I've done this before, but I don't know if I did it in junior high at all. I've made a first semester exam. I'm using the term exam very, very loosely. What it is 6 questions. You get to pick any 4 and write about it. You can look in any book that we've read. This is not a closed book thing. For example, the first question is, Christian in Pilgrim's Progress and Gulliver are both travelers. How are their accounts of their travelers similar, and how are they different? So the idea is that you would write at least a paragraph on 4 of these. But my instructions say, choose 4 and answer as thoroughly as possible. You should need at least a paragraph to answer well, but write as much as you can think of on the subject. Don't write 10 pages. Well, except if you, I mean, for you, like for Carter, I would, but for you, like maybe you would. But it's fine if you did. And I would read it. But the idea is at least a paragraph to develop the thought. But like if it's half a page to a page, great, tell me about it. So they're all questions like that. I'm trying to put together all the things we've read and talked about, and just have you put them together. And that is your only writing assignment over Christmas break. We're not starting a paper on Frankenstein, nothing else. Okay. So, you know what? And just, I'll do that later. So last week, we talked about Frankenstein, and I don't know if your copy has this, but originally it has a subtitle. Does yours have a subtitle at all? Do you know on the title page? Mine doesn't. Mine is the cheapo Dover edition, as you can see. The subtitle is Or the Modern Prometheus. The name of this book is Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus.
I think that we actually might have at least around the same copy, but I think mine is newer. But I think I have like the same copy.
Okay, so it doesn't have it. Well, on Tuesday I asked, and I don't think anybody's copy had it. So, what do you know about Prometheus? It's okay if you know nothing about Prometheus. Although he did come into that Greek myths book that we read, but that was 2 years ago, so.
My memory's not that
That's
sure.
okay. Okay, so awesome, because I have an external memory right here. With this is a story. This is a book of Greek mythology.
I'll probably
And
remember the myth.
you will.
Remember myths, just not names.
You will. It says so. It's after the account of creating the earth in the Greek story. By now, all was ready for the appearance of mankind. Even the places the good and bad should go after death had been arranged. It was time for men to be created. There is more than one account of how that came to pass. Some say it was delegated by the gods to Prometheus, the Titan who had sided with Zeus in the war with the Titans, and to his brother Epimetheus. Prometheus, whose name means forethought, was very wise, wiser even than the gods. But Epimetheus, which means afterthought, was a scatterbrained person who invariably followed his first impulse and then changed his mind. So he did in this case. Before making men, he gave all the best gifts to the animals. strength and swiftness and courage and shrewd cunning, fur and feathers and wings and shells and the like, until no good was left for men, no protective covering, and no quality to make them a match for the beasts. Too late, as always, he was sorry, and asked his brother's help. Prometheus then took over the task of creation, and thought out a way to make mankind superior. He fashioned them in a nobler shape than the animals, upright like the gods. And then he went to heaven, to the sun, where he lit a torch and brought down fire, a protection to men far better than anything else, whether fur or feathers or strength or swiftness. It goes on to say that Zeus was very, very angry with Prometheus for stealing fire and bringing it down to men, that he chained Prometheus in Tartarus. He chained him somewhere on a rock. And an eagle would fly down and eat his liver every day. You know, does it sound familiar now?
Yeah.
And then it would grow back every night. So, my first question, I guess, is who is the Prometheus? Frankenstein. And so the Greek Prometheus got punished. Is Victor punished? Like what? I mean, it's kind of obvious, but
all of his friends die, and he has to spend the rest of his life chasing a monster.
But is God punishing him, or the creature punishing him?
The creature.
Kind of. I mean, could God be using the creature to punish him? I suppose.
Especially because the creature murdered everything.
Yes,
so.
Yes. Well, somebody mentioned on Tuesday, and I thought this was really cool, because I read that, and then they said, yeah, well, if he's Prometheus, he doesn't have much foresight. Like, he doesn't seem to think about the consequences, does he, of his actions? They said he's more like Epimetheus. The creature is sort of, he seems to have foresight. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. And I also think that if an author gives a subtitle to a book, there's probably a really good reason why. And so she felt like this had something to do with the story of Prometheus. So I got to thinking then, in Greek mythology, in Greek stories, like, do you remember the story about Oedipus? It was the Oedipus that was in the Greek myths book, where, you know, he was fated to kill his father and marry his mother and everything. And we have all these other plays, and often in a Greek tragedy, there's some sort of flaw, mistake they make. All right, that the main character went off the rails because of a character flaw or a mistake he made. So when we read Macbeth last year, right? You read Macbeth with me? At the end of the year, it was just on video because we couldn't, by then because of COVID we couldn't meet. But Macbeth was ambitious, so he kills the king and he becomes king and everything. So if this is a Greek myth, Frankenstein, like what's the flaw? What do you feel like Victor's flaw is? If this is the tragedy of Victor Frankenstein, what's his flaw?
Revenge.
Well, is it the creature or the Victor?
Well, kind of both of them, to be honest.
Oh, what is Victor? I'm curious. So, what does Victor want revenge about? Like, what is?
Well, after, for instance, after the monster kills him, he starts chasing after him, and all he has in his mind is pretty much revenge, and that's what he said that's all he was like living with.
It was keeping him alive, wasn't it, at the end? That's true. Well, what about before? What about the whole creating of the creature?
Pride, maybe?
Pride? I mean, I don't have a set answer for this. He's definitely proud. I don't remember where that was. It was in the first half. It was the part we read last week. When it's the night before he brings the creature to life. Just a second, let me. Hang on. Oh, yes. No one can conceive the variety of feelings which bore me onwards, like a hurricane, in the first enthusiasm of success. Life and death appeared to me ideal bounds, which I should first break through, and pour a torrent of light into our dark world. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Pursuing these reflections, I thought, if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might in process of time renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption. There's lots of me and I in there. I will be the founder of a new race. I will be the object of their admiration and affection. And I don't know if we mentioned this. I know we talked about it on Tuesday last week. You know, he won't give Walton the secret. And there's two reasons not to give the secret. One is the reason he gives. Well, we wouldn't want anyone else to make a creature like this and unleash this on mankind. Can you think of another reason not to give the secret?
Well, if you're the only one who knows the secret, then you're special.
You're special. So pride could be. Definitely pushing back the boundaries of science. You know, we talked about that. Because we can do something, should we do it? So, go ahead, please.
I did make a note at the end of this, because I noticed this. I was like listening to it, and I was like, well, I realized that Frankenstein and his monster are like a lot alike.
Tell me more.
So this is what I wrote. I'm like, truly both are to blame for the deaths of people. Both have a sob story. Both thirst for revenge above any drink that should meet the lips of men. I was like, they seem to have the same kind of like attitude towards everything. Like, there's pride. They think they should have everything, and pretty much they're doing everything for their own benefit, kind of.
There's I would say entitlement. The monster certainly feels like he's entitled to a full share. Victor has, I like that you said that. He has a sob story. They both have a sob story. It's like, oh, my mom died, and so here's what gets really weird. I read, and I don't know if your copy has essays by people who, I don't know, spend lots of time thinking about Frankenstein and writing essays about it. And there were some weird theories. Okay, so here's theory number one. What if the creature really is like a split personality of Victor? Either kind of psychologically or literally. Like, what if there's no monster? So you get to thinking about it, what could he have against these people? I mean, if he either desired or somehow brought about the deaths of these people. So one is William. Can you think of any grudge he could have against William?
Well, I mean, I guess he's kind of like, you'd say, a favorite of the family.
You know, that I'm sure this would never happen in your family at all. And when you get enough children, you know, it I don't know, not wears off the newness of having a new sibling, but the envy isn't so great, you know. But like, he was alone, and then Ernest, who we know nothing about Ernest except he is very good grammar when he greets his brother very formally. But yeah, William is the baby, coddled. Victor's tossed out into the world. I mean, he wants to go to school. He's sort of sent out into the world. William's the baby. Justine, I got to thinking, you know, here he's been set up with his cousin Elizabeth. But what if he has a thing for Justine? But he can't have her, so he's angry. Elizabeth basically killed his mother. I mean, you know, because it was her illness that led to his mom getting scarlet. Henry, I don't know, what could he have against Henry?
I mean, he wanted to go alone to that one place, but Henry came with him.
He did. Henry was kind of snooping around and horning in where he wasn't welcome. Also, it sounds like Henry, there's that one comment about Henry's dad being a man of business and not really interested in learning, but other than that, it sounds like Henry is a pretty likable sort. Victor seems moody. What do you mean? Remember that paragraph where he says, "Oh, my childhood was idyllic," and then the very next paragraph he said, "My temper was somewhat violent and my passions agitated." Yes, they are. But Henry's just sort of, yeah, it's all good. Let's just be happy. Ooh, look at the pretty countryside. He's just really likable. And maybe I don't know. But an argument could be made for exactly what you sensed, that they're images of each other, and that perhaps the creature goes for people that Victor himself has sort of a love-hate relationship with.
And here's something that, just like I was thinking, like, sometimes people in general feel like they have like two different sides to them. There's the good and then there's the bad. Maybe Mary Shelley was trying to get across, like, here's the bad and here's like the person. They're trying to face their troubles, their violent side, their bad side, their monster.
And is he very successful at facing this?
No.
It doesn't appear that he's very successful. Have you ever read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Or do you know this story?
I feel like you... Where did I hear that? I heard that really recently. I feel like...
I don't know if I don't feel like I would have mentioned it last week, but... So, Dr. Jekyll is a scientist, and it's the same exact thing that you're describing. He wants to take his evil and separate it out into another entity. So he drinks this potion and he becomes Mr. Hyde. And he has no knowledge of what Mr. Hyde does. But it's not a separate being. I mean, it's him. Although he changes somehow because he looks kind of ugly and deformed, but it's still him. And he goes out and he does all kinds of atrocious stuff at night. He robs and kills and beats people up, and then in the morning, he turns back into Dr. Jekyll. And, of course, Dr. Jekyll is trying to hide this from the world because it's him, Dr. Hyde. It's spelled Hyde, but it's the part of himself he wants to hide away, hide from the world. He also is not very successful. I will not just tell you everything that happens in this story, but I will just say he is not a successful attempt at isolating his evil. Okay, so why does the monster say he's bad? What made the monster bad in the monster's opinion?
Because Frankenstein abandoned him.
Okay, so abandonment by his creator and also everybody else. He said basically people were mean to me and it made me mean. If people were good to me, I would be good. So
I almost think that if he had been given a chance with that one blind guy would have actually liked him. But he didn't get one because he was chased out before that. And I just felt really bad about that. I was like...
Yeah, he had a moment. Yeah, that was very unfortunate. If he could have known they were going to be gone longer. So let me, as an aside, can you sort of understand where the creature's coming from? I feel kind of bad for him. It's not fair, especially the kid he rescues from drowning, and then the person chases him off. Like, I just saved her life, and you're not thanking me. You should be thanking me.
I feel like that Mary Shelley, by writing this character, I mean, I know some things about characters, and sometimes writers make certain characters to make people like have a feeling about that character, and maybe she created that character to make you feel sympathy for him, because we as humans feel that kind of rejection, and we feel out of place. We all feel rejection. We feel like were monsters or ugly or anything like that.
But can we use that though to can we blame that for our evil choices?
But like, yeah, I'm just thinking that's what she was trying to like get us to feel in that, like with his story and stuff.
I think you're right. You know, there more than one occasion he says, "You're my creator. I should be your Adam." He compares himself to God and his creature, and I just seeing Mary Shelley's life. You know, her mom died. She never got to know her. She had a sob story, you know, in a sense. Her dad was not very attentive. You know, had his business and everything. I get the idea she kind of raised herself, and I mean, I feel like you're not totally stable if you're 16 and you run off with a married guy to Switzerland. You know, this doesn't seem like a real stable decision. If she feels abandoned, and if that's her opinion of fathers, if that's her opinion of God, he set us here and he abandoned us, and that so she's justified in whatever choices she makes in life. I don't know. I noticed something towards the end of the book. Oh, I was going to ask you, did you see it coming a mile away that Elizabeth was going to get killed?
Oh, yeah. No, I was yelling. I was like,
dude, give her a gun.
I was yelling out loud. I'm like, you are an idiot. Like, what do you assume? Oh, I'm going to be there on your wedding day. Why couldn't he have just killed you right away if he really wanted to kill you? He wants to make you suffer as much as he's suffered. He doesn't want to kill you. No, he wants you to suffer.
Yes. Which brings us to the forethought and afterthought. Like, Victor is not very perceptive, I feel like. And this is the prime example, though. Like, unbelievable that he does not catch on to this. Okay, so, which brings me to something else before I go to the other thing I was going to talk about. Last week, we talked about the fact that he brings this thing to life and then he goes and takes a nap. Okay, so Elizabeth gets killed, and apparently he just never saw it coming. It's like, oh, you go upstairs by yourself with no protection, and I'll be up in a little while, you know, unless the psychological idea that he wanted to get her out of the way. But is there, so I told you about these essays, people's crazy. What if the creature doesn't even exist? What if it's in Victor's imagination? He is kind of raving when he tells this whole thing. Like, remember, this is told to Walton. He's ill. And the weirdest thing that makes me not understand how the story he's telling is true is how in the world does Henry's body get to Ireland? You know, so Henry, Victor decides he's not going to make the mate. And he rips her up and he gets in the boat. And he dumps it, and then he lays down in the boat to take a nap. It's not a lake he's on. It's on the channel, but he could go out to the ocean. Like, he's on a body of water open to the ocean. He lays down and takes a nap, and he drifts to Ireland, where Henry's body has been planted. How did the creature know that Victor was going to end up in Ireland? How did he know to plant the body there?
I do have a comment, though. I saw a version that my mom had that had a afterwards, and in it, Walton saw the monster.
Oh, yes. Yes. And that's the only thing. What if Walton made it up?
I mean, he could have.
What if Walton is trapped in the ice and he has nothing to do but make up this story? I don't know. But yes, that's the thing. Walton says he saw the creature. Unless Walton has been listening to this story and it's like twisted his brain and he's seeing things now. No, by the way, I don't really believe that. But that just seems like a plot hole to me. How did the creature know that he was going to end up in Ireland? The creature really has forethought. Like the creature can predict the future now. I don't know. So at the end, they're trapped in the ice. Walton's ship is trapped in the ice. And Victor has told this story over many days, presumably. Here, just a second. I'm looking for the... So they're trapped in the ice, and the crew is basically on the edge of mutiny. Do you remember this? Mm-hmm. They are trapped in the ice, and they are telling him that when they get free of the ice, you have to promise to take us back, that you won't take us any farther north. And they say this in front of Victor, and it says, I hesitated before I answered. This is Walton speaking. When Frankenstein, who had at first been silent, and indeed appeared hardly to have force enough to attend, now roused himself, his eyes sparkled, and his cheeks flushed with momentary vigor. Turning towards the men, he said, What do you mean? What do you demand of your captain? Are you then so easily turned from your design? Did you not call this a glorious expedition? And wherefore was it glorious? Not because the way was smooth and placid as a southern sea, but because it was full of dangers and terror. Because at every new incident your fortitude was to be called forth, and your courage exhibited, because danger and death surrounded it, and these you were to brave and overcome. For this was it an honorable undertaking. You were hereafter to be hailed as the benefactors of your species, your names adored as belonging to brave men who encountered death for honor and the benefit of mankind. And now behold, with the first imagination of danger, or if you will, the first mighty and terrific trial of your courage, you shrink away, and are content to be handed down as men who had not strength enough to endure cold and peril. And so, poor souls, they were chilly and returned to their warm firesides. He goes on, Oh, be men, or be more than men. Be steady to your purposes, as firm as a rock. Okay, so he's just been telling Walton this terrible story and how he had such poor judgment, and he forged ahead with an enterprise that was doomed to bring despair and misery. And then he turns around and tells a crew full of guys, but go for your dream. Don't give up. Don't let things stand in your way of what's going to conquer nature and conquer... I know, exactly. So, I wonder, do you feel like Victor dies penitent? Or do you feel like he wavers even there at the end? Is he really sorry he made the creature? I mean, I don't have an answer, and I don't know if there's an easy yes or no. It certainly sounds like he's ambivalent about pushing back the frontiers of science and the glory that will come to you when you do it. He won't tell Walton the secret. But do you remember, there's a comment, Walton's writing all this down, and Victor knows he's writing it all down. And Victor wants to do something with the letter. Do you remember?
Doesn't he want to, go over it and make sure everything's right?
He wants to go over it and make sure everything's right. Uh-huh. If this is going to be communicated, I want it to be communicated correctly. It's going to go to Walton's sister. Does he think this story is just going to get buried somewhere? Oh, no. If you got a letter describing this, would you not tell people? He's going to be famous. He's going to be famous. And I don't know if he totally feels bad about that. I wanted you guys to write a paper, but since I have your little exam, I decided we are not going to write a paper on this, or at least not yet. But the big question is, should he have gone ahead and made the creature a mate? What do you think? Did he make the right decision, or did he completely botch that one?
Honestly, I feel like he botched it. Although the creature, like, it could have gone badly, like, I don't see that it would completely go badly, and it could actually make things better. But it could also make things worse, so it's kind of hard to answer.
It is, because you have to know both trails. On the one hand, the creature says, I will go away from people. I will be happy and satisfied because I will have a partner, and I won't be alone anymore. And we will go away from all civilization, and I'll leave everybody alone. But then what is Victor's? Do you remember some of his, what does he think might happen?
That the other creature will be worse, cause more havoc, they'll have kids.
Like, oh, she might just take an aversion to him. Like everyone else dislikes the creature because he's ugly. Even if she's kind of ugly too, we don't know that she's going to find him attractive. And maybe she'll feel the same as Victor, that she wants human companionship. Or not Victor, as the creature. I wonder if it's possible the creature could be disgusted with her. I didn't really think about that.
That could be possible.
But we don't know. And I don't know. So if he doesn't make the creature, which is the choice he made, what are the bad consequences in the story?
The creature's gonna kill everybody he loves.
Yes, he's going to kill everybody he loves. But what are the potential consequences if he does make the creature and the new one is bad too?
They could kill everyone he loves.
Well, or not, maybe even not the people he loves. Like, because random people. So I wonder, if he doesn't create the mate, he knows he's sacrificing his loved ones. But if he does create it and it goes bad too, he might be sacrificing a lot more people. It's the only way I can think of to make that a noble choice.
Something that makes me think that Victor doesn't really want to, like, destroy his monster is that he doesn't. He just doesn't. He has a lot of chances to at least try. Like, he doesn't even try. Like, when he does, he's like, oh, I froze up. And I'm like, that sounds smart. But it's like, could you not do it, or did you not want to do it?
And why might he not want to, do you think?
Because it's the thing that he created. He's like, super impressive.
Yes. It is super impressive.
Except for the fact that, there is one huge plot hole. Human being could not put a soul into a...
Yeah, it seems to have a soul, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And is it...
She mentioned something like that, and I'm like, that's not physically possible, or even, like, it's only possible by God. God's the only one who can control that kind of stuff, and it's not like Victor could just make a soul.
Right, but from the scientific, so think of, I keep mentioning Descartes, think of the line of thought that rises from that and the scientific revolution, that the idea that if we can give life, all that life entails is just a physical reaction, including the mind and the conscience and the soul and all of that. And so maybe he's thinking, maybe Mary Shelley is thinking that if something's alive, it automatically gets a soul, but
it's not quite how it works.
No,
because she's created in itself, along with, like, the human being. It's created into the human being, not, like, separately. It's not like, oh, here's a soul. I'm just gonna
because a machine doesn't know right from wrong, does it? A machine does what it's. If our bodies are like machines don't discern right from wrong. The creature knows right from wrong. He chooses to do the wrong, doesn't he? Because he feels like he has a good reason. I suppose, does everybody who does wrong think they have a good reason, generally?
A lot of them do, but some of them just don't care.
Sometimes it seems random and they don't care. At least the creature's not that far gone. Like, he feels like he has a good reason. We might disagree with him, but he feels like he has a good reason. Yeah, I don't, so it's hard to say what would have happened from a course of action he didn't take. But the third option, though, is he makes the mate and the mate is good. And hey, he could have made her smaller and less physically able to do harm. Somebody mentioned on Tuesday, he could have made her without the ability to bear any children. So there would be no more of them. But it could have gone very well. Like, he could have saved the lives of his loved ones and saved other people's lives if indeed they had gone off and lived together happily ever after somewhere. Yeah, it's hard to say. Well, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was shouting. I was like, not really shouting, but I was like very agitated when Victor was like, he's like, oh, I'll just spend like my last day with Elizabeth. And I'm like, I was literally shouting, get a brain!
Maybe you
You got one for your monster?
Yes. Where is your, maybe he gave his away. Maybe he used his own. No,
That's why there's so much away.
It is amazing, like the lack of foresight, just even from the very beginning when he creates the creature, and he's working on it for months, but he doesn't really apparently consider that it will be hideous when it's up walking around and talking, and he has no plan. What do I do with it after? Somebody on Tuesday, this was a really good point, and this was an option I hadn't thought of. Instead of making a new creature, Victor could have sacrificed himself and said, I will be your companion. Instead of turning from you in horror, I will now go away with you somewhere.
Or at least be with him, if he doesn't go away with him, at least protect him and make sure people aren't like screaming terror at him.
Yes. And I will be your friend. And of course, it would have been easier to do that from the very beginning. After he's killed his brother, his friend, and framed Justine, it's a little harder to let all that go.
And you know, it's obvious that he just really wants a friend because, I mean, he tried taking William away for that purpose.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that seems like a good option, and that could have been self-sacrifice. I mean, at the end, it looks like Victor is being self-sacrificing because he wants to go, but do you feel like that's a sacrifice, him chasing it down, or do you feel like he's just driven by rage?
Driven by rage. He doesn't know the meaning of self-sacrifice. He doesn't know the meaning of selflessness either. He's kind of selfish and kind of like deluded in every single way. And I'm like, where does this come from? Where do you get the idea that this is okay? Where do you get the idea that you should have done that? Where do you get the idea that you could just take a nap after?
Yes. Oh, think about the whole story from the perspective of his family, for instance. He doesn't write for years, months anyway, and he knows it's going to upset his family. But I'm too busy. I can't be bothered. I don't want to do that. And then he puts it off even after the creature, when he falls ill, But then he comes home and he's all brooding. Of course, he won't tell anybody why. He doesn't subject himself to potential ridicule by telling the truth before Justine gets, executed. But then the whole, oh yes, I'll marry you, Elizabeth, but I want to go off to England for a year for scientific research. Imagine what that must look like. I mean, I feel like from the perspective of his dad and Elizabeth and Ern, it doesn't look like he cares very much about them. And then he rips up the creature. Okay, you're Victor. You rip up the creature, the second one, and the creature comes and threatens you and leaves. What would be the first thing you would do?
Protect my family.
Okay, and Henry, who's even closer. Like, I would get in a boat and go straight to wherever Henry was and say, Henry, look out. Get a gun. We got to protect ourselves because he's coming for you. But he goes, he hangs around, he cleans up his stuff, he dumps the body parts, and then he takes a nap in the boat.
He takes a nap after he creates the thing again.
What is it with him and naps? I don't know.
He just likes naps, I guess.
But I never really thought about this the first couple times I read this. And
well,
but the more we talk about it, the more Victor just seems like really a jerk.
Yeah. That's what my mom, I'm like, I don't, at the beginning of the book, I'm like, this is the beginning too, so I was like, not even aware of that much. I'm like, I don't really like Frankenstein, he kind of just stinks, and my mom goes, Frankenstein's a jerk.
Tell your mom I agree with her.
Exact.
Frankenstein is a jerk. Yeah, he doesn't think out anything. For a man of science, supposedly rational and logical and learned and intellectual, he really doesn't see the next step he needs to take at most places in this story. So yes, I would rush off and protect Henry first thing.
This is going to be quoted someday, but my whole, for being a genius, he's really stupid. It's going to be the biggest quote out there.
So, he's just given that pep talk that I read earlier to the crew. And then he says this, "Farewell, Walton. Seek happiness and tranquility, and avoid ambition, even if it be only the apparently innocent one of distinguishing yourself in science and discoveries. Yet, why do I say this? I have myself been blasted in these hopes. Yet another may succeed." See, Walton, scientific ambition leads to misery, but it happened to me, but it might not happen to you. He can't make up his mind. Is this a good thing he's done or a bad thing he's done?
And then what makes me laugh is that he just went telling these guys, oh yeah, go do that thing.
Go do it.
Be like heroes. And then he's like,
oh, but avoid ambition.
Avoid ambition. He's real smart. You can just tell.
He says this, and I thought this is insightful. He's finishing up his story. He's telling, actually, this is the creature. I'm sorry, the creature is now speaking. The creature is speaking over Victor's body in the cabin. He says, "I knew that I was preparing for myself a deadly torture, but I was the slave, not the master of an impulse which I detested, yet could not disobey." Okay, again, so here's another... Destiny, exactly. Remember Victor? Oh, it was my destiny, it was my destiny. Oh, here's the creature. Oh, but it's my destiny to suffer and to kill all these people and make my creator suffer. So he goes on. He says, "Yet when she died, Elizabeth, nay, then I was not miserable. I had cast off all feeling, subdued all anguish, to riot in the excess of my despair. Evil thenceforth became my good. Urged thus far, I had no choice but to adapt my nature to an element which I had willingly chosen. The completion of my demoniacal design became an insatiable passion." He says, I felt bad. I didn't want to kill William. I felt bad. By the time I got to Elizabeth, evil became my good. And I just wondered if that was a pretty good description of fallen, evil humanity.
He's like, oh, I felt bad for all these people, but
yeah. By the time I got to Elizabeth, I didn't really care anymore. But I wonder if this is a truth, that if one follows that sort of path, that eventually you get to the place where the evil becomes your good. I'm trying to think of the scripture. Oh, God does not tempt anybody. We are tempted when we are dragged away by our own desires, and this gives birth to sin. That is not a direct quote from the Bible. This is my paraphrase. But he's saying the same thing. Except he didn't say he was dragged away. He did say he was dragged away, didn't he? It was my destiny. I mean, it was my destiny. I was destined to live out this passion.
He literally said like dragged by the foot or something like that. I feel like
he might have.
I think it was literally somewhere I heard something like that.
What were you? I mean, I told you before you read that it wasn't going to be like movie versions. That it wasn't going to be maybe what you expected. What was the most startling or unexpected, not event of the plot necessarily, but thing about the book?
Probably that the monster was eloquent.
Yeah. That really, the very first time I read it, and they met, and he started, let me explain to you my... What? Because in movies, he's always just grunting, and do you find it, yeah, I mean, you talked about it being scary, I feel like, last week. Did you? Maybe not. I mean, do you think the point of this story is to be scary? Because they're supposed to make a ghost story. And she said, oh, what chilled my blood will chill another's blood, Mary Shelley says. But do you think the intent of the story is to scare?
Maybe not in the way that you would most think about.
I don't find it particularly scary.
I don't find a lot of things scary, but yeah, I didn't find it particularly scary.
Notice that the name of the book is Frankenstein. It's not The Thing or The Creature. So who is this? What is this book really about?
Frankenstein, which is something I was like, whenever I put in my notes, I'm like, the monster, and then I'm like, sometimes in my mind I think, Frankenstein's almost like the real monster.
So if the real monster, if the creature became what he was because of abuse or neglect and abuse, how did Victor turn into what he was? He said he had an awesome childhood. I mean, he lost his mom, but people do lose their mothers and they don't turn to a life of crime necessarily. What made him so driven to do this?
Purely ambition, it seems like. Because there's not a whole lot. He had a great childhood. He had his mom probably till he was like 18, I think it was, or something like 16, 18.
I mean, till Elizabeth was old enough to, well, we don't know how Elizabeth was when she was sick, was she? Did we?
What do you think?
But I got the impression, well, I mean, Ernest is 7 years younger than he is, and then there's William. Right, so there had to be enough years for both of them to be born. The only thing I can think of, you remember when he was reading those science books, those like alchemy and stuff, and his dad said, oh, those books are trash, don't. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like he set his will even more to study it after his dad told him it was trash. And it kind of makes you wonder what's up with his relationship with his dad.
Sometimes even sheltered children, sheltered children are more prone to get into the wrong places because
this is true.
Because they want to be rebellious because their parents never let them be rebellious. I don't feel like that because I have a different personality, but I do know people who are kind of like that.
So we'd have to dig into something that we're not given in this book, but some people have read into it Mary Shelley's dissatisfaction with her own father. And obviously dissatisfaction with fathers. Victor is the creature's father, and he's a very unsatisfactory father. Yeah, it's interesting because we have this image of this being a horror novel, but it's more a psychological look at pursuing forbidden knowledge, a drive to ambition.
You could definitely compare Mary Shelley's parents to Victor's parents, seeing that her mom died when she was young too, and then there was his dad. And I don't think Victor's dad was around that much for him either, except for sending him letters and stuff.
They're obviously not close because he goes so long without writing home. He doesn't seem particularly close to Elizabeth either, frankly. He seems rather isolated. He's got Henry, but he keeps Henry at arm's length. You know, he doesn't want to. I don't know. If you had a best friend and you created a creature, do you think you might tell your best friend?
He doesn't seem like he wants people to be near him.
No.
He doesn't want anybody else's help. He wants to do it all on his own, which is...
Doesn't work, does it? Well, and he knows that deep down. The creature knows that. It is not good for man to be alone, you know? It's not good. We are social beings. So, thinking about pushing back scientific boundaries, what are some of the things today that you've heard about people trying to do that might be crossing the boundaries of where we should go? Abortion, certainly. Which isn't really invention or research so much. But when they use stem cell research and that sort of thing, when they use the remains of aborted babies for research, that's problematic. I was thinking something like cloning. Should we clone creatures? I don't know. This has become commonplace now, but in its day, and I still don't, I'm ambivalent about this, test tube babies, as they call, in vitro fertilization and surrogate mothers, and I don't know, it opens up a lot of problems when we start playing God with science. Back to your abortion, we have the technology to decide. Certainly, but if the child is handicapped, we decide whether or not they're going to live. But we also have the technology to find out genetically, is this going to be a blonde, blue-eyed little boy or a brunette little girl, and choose accordingly. Most people now would say, oh, that's awful. That would be awful. But most people 50, 100 years ago would say what we're doing now is awful. What are they going to say in 50 years? Is this going to be an acceptable thing? And so I guess my question is, what criteria, how can we ask science to draw the line? Where do we tell science, you shouldn't cross that boundary? I don't know the answer. I suppose there are people who are ethicists today that are studying the answer. There's certain things we look at and that's wrong.
The things that are I don't know, the things that they're trying to introduce to our minds, today, I've heard somebody say about abortion, even though they're pro-life, they're like, well, if we said that abortion is illegal in America, then we wouldn't give people the free choice. And I was like...
That's right. We would not give people the free choice to murder anyone in this country. Yeah, that's exactly that's exactly our position. Huh. Yes.
Funny how that works, not giving people the freedom to murder. It's interesting.
We already don't give people the freedom to murder.
Funny how it makes a difference if they're inside the womb or not.
Yes. Which it doesn't really. Another, I guess, hot button topic that is blurring boundaries in science would be the whole transgender thing. That lack of recognition that gender is A, obviously physical, but B is more than physical, and you can't just randomly turn a boy into a girl or a girl into a boy, but we do. And the question is, should we have ever opened up that can of worms? I don't know what else to call it, you know?
Definitely not.
I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder how many years it's been, how far back in history you'd have to go, and I don't think very many decades, before you would just say of those people, they have a mental illness and they need counseling. And that would have been, and of course people now are horrified. Oh my goodness, that's how you would treat those people? Yes, that's how I would treat those people. Yes.
Because it's true.
Because it's true.
But they don't think it's true. They think that it's not a mental illness. It's something that just comes naturally.
It's just something that comes naturally.
It's not.
So, I mean, obviously boundaries have to be set. We're not setting very good boundaries. Right now it kind of appears like, well, who, in your opinion, Catherine, who is setting the boundaries? Like how do we, just in America, in 2020, how do we decide if a scientist is doing something that's acceptable or not acceptable?
Well, in my opinion, we shouldn't have the choice to decide that because it's not really. It's really up to God what kind.
Yes.
It should be at least.
It should be. It should be.
But we pretend as if it's our own duty to say, oh, that's right, that's wrong.
That's exactly what I was fishing for, Kath. It's public opinion, right? We take everything in the court of public opinion. If most people think cloning is okay, we'll do it. If most people think turning someone into the other sex is okay, we'll do that. It seems to be public opinion. Like we're voting on it. But some things aren't votable. It's not, like, how would Victor's case have been different if the majority of people in Geneva thought it was okay to bring a creature to life? Okay, well, most people think it's okay. Like, it has really bad effects, and he went around and he killed people, but most people think it's okay. Would that make it okay? Again, no. It just wouldn't, would it? It's alarming, isn't it? But it makes this book appropriate today in a way that I'm not sure Mary Shelley could have seen it being appropriate. I mean, they knew that science was pushing back barriers. Did you read the paper about galvanism? Did you look up more about the frog legs and the diagrams online? If you get bored over Christmas, you can look that up. You know, they were pushing back boundaries in all these areas and finding out the secrets of nature, as that professor at Ingolstadt says. But I don't know if she could have foreseen how far we have pressed those boundaries. Obviously, it was something she was considering, though. I mean, it's part of what this book is about. But now it's become more appropriate than ever because we can literally do very ethically, morally questionable things with science.
Yeah, we don't morally question them most of the time.
No, we don't. We don't. I mean, some of us do, obviously, but public opinion doesn't seem to. There's an idea, I get the impression that most people think that the more scientifically savvy we are, the better. Like, the more we can do, the better. The more we can control nature, the better off we are.
The question is, what good are you doing yourself by this? You think that, like, I don't even know where your thoughts are when you think this is okay, because obviously they're not in the right place, and obviously you're not even considering that this could be terrible. Like, I just don't think that they consider things. Mm-hmm. They just don't. And maybe that's like the same with Frankenstein. They just don't have foresight.
Yeah. And part of that is their own fault, and part of it is one can never see all the avenues that might happen based on your actions. That's why we have to be careful with our actions, right? I mean, you have to really stop and consider, even sometimes when we do small things, what's the possible outcome? Do you have any other comments on Frankenstein in general?
I think so.
Did you enjoy reading it?
I did. In the end, the first half I didn't like, but I liked it eventually.
I feel like it's one of those where she had to set the stage and get it rolling. And then the second half really is just like rolls it's all the way downhill. You know what I mean? It's like dead.
Until it
after.
gets to the climax.
Yes.
Then it becomes okay.
Where the creature kills himself. Because I suppose he has nothing to live for anymore, does he? If he's driven by revenge and the person he wants to torture is now dead, he has no use. Which makes me, I mean, he did evil things, but he wasn't just indiscriminately being evil. You know, it was targeted evil. I don't know that targeted evil is better than indiscriminate evil. He didn't want to just rampage throughout the world in anger and punish all of mankind for rejecting him. Just Victor. Interesting. Well, the next book we are going to read is Emma by Jane Austen, which is completely different. Now, have you read some Jane Austen? Have you read Emma before?
I've read some Jane Austen. I don't think I've read Emma before,
Yay.
although I may have.
It would be Pride and Prejudice, but I had a lot of Wednesday students that had already read it, and I wanted to do some Jane Austen. I know, I'm sorry. Well, you missed the boat. I'm sorry. It's Emma.
I know all Jane Austen fans are gonna hate me, but I like the shows better than the books.
Oh, well.
First of all, because I am a cinema nerd.
Okay.
Second, because I don't like the genres that she has. I only like books mostly if they're tragedy, romance, and adventure. But hers don't have a lot of adventure. Maybe there's a little bit, but there's not a whole lot. So I don't find it very interesting.
People might categorize her books sometimes as some sort of romance because there's generally some sort of marriage, there's lots of engagement talk, but I really think she's more about observations of society. And this is a society that's very, very foreign to us. We're very relaxed, right? We don't dress up for many things. We aren't formal. We call people by their first names very quickly. We don't think it's bad to just drop in on someone unannounced if it's convenient. And in Jane Austen's world, all of these things would be awful. And so,
her time it was.
And her time it was. And so what I would like to look at, and so what am I having you read? Chapters 1 through 13. So even though you have a 3-week stretch, last year I feel like sometimes when we had a break, I gave you extra reading. I'm not doing that to you this year. All right. So this is just the normal amount, the normal number of pages that I would give you for a week, but it's for, we have 2 weeks off. So chapters 1 through 13. What I want to look at, especially at the beginning here, is etiquette, manners. And the paper I have, and I will send this to you, Carter. This is John Henry Newman, Cardinal Newman. Later he was Cardinal. From a book called The Idea of a University. And it's a section on what makes a gentleman. So I would like you to read this short thing on what makes a gentleman. And what I'd like you to look for and think about as you read the first quarter of Emma is, what do we gain? What does society gain by having rules of etiquette and manners? And what do we gain by not having them? So it's sort of like, who do you think is better off? Because you lose and you gain either way. So I just want you to, you could physically jot down ideas as you read, or you can just take mental note of things that are outcomes of a society that's very rigidly set in its ways, and the good of the outcome of a society that's more like us, that we're very, very kind of lax in our relationships with each other. And yeah, we're done kind of early because you weren't here, Carter, to talk to Catherine. So have a good Christmas. Bye-bye.